All right, it looks like we have a few people coming in here right on time. I'm so glad that you all could make it to our second masterclass of this year, focused on sensory play. So as you're coming into the Zoom room, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. If you would, make sure that it's selected all panelists and attendees. So at the bottom of the chat box, it says two. There's a little drop down. You can select all panelists and attendees. Let us know your name, what city you're coming from, if you're here in Chicago, if you're coming from somewhere else. And then if you have any kiddos at home, and their ages. So I just put in there, I'm Jessie, I'm here in Chicago. I have a son named James who's 4 years old. Go ahead and put your information into the chat so we can know a little bit more about who's here together just as we get started. And I'll check, it looks like, yeah, we have lots more people coming into the room. It's great to have you all here. We have a really, really special presentation for you all today. We have a special guest who is here with us, Elise Zavala, who will be bringing into the Zoom screen in just a little bit here to talk about sensory play. Great, Abby's here. Hi, Abby. I know that we have some vocel enrolled, some vocel member, parents, caregivers, educators joining today. So really happy to have you all here. Go ahead and put your name, where you're coming from, your kiddos' ages, or if you're a teacher or you work with kiddos, let us know what ages you work with as well. So it looks like 0 to 5-year-olds, 0 to 3-year-olds. Hi, Susie. Glad you're here as well. And then if you'd like to also share maybe either a favorite childhood activity that you had or a favorite childhood activity of the kids that you work with or your kiddos at home. What's something that's a favorite? You can also feel free to share that in the chat. I know my favorite as a child was painting on the easel. I'll put that in there too. Hi, Clarabelle. Glad you're here as well. And Shar is here. Great to have you here too, Shar. We'll take just a minute or so more to let the last few people come into the Zoom room. We have a great turnout for today. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. This was a highly requested topic from families in the Child Parent Academy, which is one of vocel's programs. And Susan says, I think that might be Susan, there we go. Favorite activity, swinging on the swing. Yes, that's a great sensory one. Talk more about that, I'm sure. Hi, Oren, so glad you're joining all the way from New York. Finger painting, yes. Dressing up, awesome. Great, so we'll go ahead and get started. If you haven't gotten a chance to introduce yourself or share playing in the mud. Oh, so fun, so sensory focused. Please go ahead and keep sharing if you haven't yet. But we're gonna get started here and share with you all. One moment, I gotta realize I was way ahead of myself on the slide. So let me switch back here. And to get started, we are going to share a couple quotes to kind of ground ourselves in this space and just get ourselves in the right brain space to have this conversation. Like I said, my name is Jessie, Jessie Ilhart. I'm the executive director and one of the co-founders for vocel, and I'll tell you a little bit more about vocel for anyone who's new to our organization in just a moment. But when I think about quotes that relate to sensory play, I thought of this one: the senses, being explorers of the world, open the way to knowledge. Our apparatus for educating the senses offers the child a key to guide his explorations of the world, by Dr. Maria Montessori. And for me, this quote reminds me that sensory play isn't just about having fun, although I will say that often, sensory play activities might be more fun for our kiddos, thinking of, swinging, twirling, sinking our hands into something ooey gooey like that mud in the chat, or playing something like freeze dance. But more than just fun, sensory play is also the way that young children really learn about their world. And if children can be more in touch with their senses, it actually equips them to better explore their world. And then I really loved this other quote, so I included one more for today's masterclass. I am a parent, I am a caregiver, I am a family member. It's my job to see the world through this child's eyes, explain this child to teachers, explain this child to the community. It is my privilege to fight for this child's needs. And I think for this, when I saw it, what stuck out to me was the emphasis on this child. It made me really think about my own little one, James, and he's always been a pretty active kid, pretty rough and tumble type of kid. And I realized quickly, even when he was just a toddler or 2-year-old, that he got pleasure out of really different things than I did as a child. He really liked super tight hugs, or he liked being squished by a couch cushion. And so this idea of seeing the world through his eyes and making sure that his teachers or his caregivers were also seeing things through that lens of what works for him was something that I found so powerful. And I think that idea really informs a lot of our approach at vocel. So one of our values, our core values, is welcome all. We think about how individual kiddos need to be really embraced, right, for their unique interests or their differences in order for it to be a welcoming environment for all. So those two quotes I share just to help get us in that brain space to talk and learn more today. In terms of a couple quick logistical notes, we are recording today's session, so you can feel free to sit back, watch, listen, enjoy this hour of learning, and don't worry about having to take any notes or anything like that. You can always watch the recording or reach out to us if there was something shared that you have a question about. Know that there are a lot of different backgrounds of folks who are joining. So we have people here who are parents, who are caregivers. We have folks who are teachers, who are more kind of clinicians or therapists. We have folks who are grandparents or folks who are early learning advocates and kind of interested in the field from whatever vantage point. So lots of different people here today. We hope you'll all take a nugget away that you can really use with your own children or in your work. And then we also want you to submit questions. So we know that webinars, we want to make them as interactive as possible. So hope that you'll submit questions in the chat, even just share your reactions or comments, especially as Elise is talking. If there's something that strikes a chord with you, or you'd love to do that with your own child, put that in the chat to send some of that love. And then also, if you have questions, we want to answer those today. So you can put them in the chat and we'll be monitoring it, and we'll bring them to Elise at the end of her presentation. Or you can click the Q&A button. So it should be down at the bottom of your screen. There's a little button that says Q&A. You can use that if you want to submit a question anonymously. So if you have a question about a child of a certain age or about your child, feel free to submit that as well. And those questions will go right to me and to Elise. And before we welcome Elise, I want to tell you for just 2 minutes who vocel is, what we do. So vocel stands for Viewing Our Children as Emerging Leaders. Our mission is to help ensure that every child has the foundation to learn, grow, and lead. And so how we do that, we strengthen the capacity of parents, caregivers, and educators to help their young children thrive. And that's big, right? Thrive. We definitely think about school success, being ready for school, but also thriving beyond from a social, emotional, sensory health, and mental, emotional health perspective as well. And how we do it is really that we provide child-focused programming in overburdened, under-resourced communities in Chicago. We build parents, caregivers, and educators' competence in child development. So trying to think about all that's locked up in college courses and textbooks and whatnot, and bringing that kind of brain science to the masses. And we also build resilience so that folks can navigate the challenges of raising young children. And I want to talk a little bit just about how we think about this topic of sensory play, how that plays out at vocel and in our programs, in our child-parent classes. So first, I think in our classes, you would see lots of choice. So we really promote following the child's lead. We don't say things like, you're going to water table today, or you're going to blocks today. We really allow children to seek out activities based on their interests and preferences. And so much of sensory play is about those sensory preferences, right? So children in our classes might listen to story time from a chair, or they might be laying on their belly, or they might be standing or kneeling, and all of those are really acceptable. So when we think about sometimes traditional sort of classroom rules, sometimes they lead to one way of doing things. So like walk in the classroom, right? When we think about what's at the root of that, we actually want kids to move safely in the classroom, but recognizing that there are other ways to do that that may really serve a child's needs better. Is it okay for kids to tiptoe or to hop or to bear crawl, right? Sometimes when kids bear crawl, they're also getting that input on their hands as well as on their feet. So the final piece here is that in vocel's programs, we try to think about and explore with parents or teachers what might be the motivator for a specific behavior we're seeing in a child. So if a child is at circle time and they're laying or leaning on another child, or they're kind of encroaching on another child's space, why might they be doing that? What might they be seeking out? What are they trying to get out of that experience? Or maybe they're avoiding something, right? I think Joel put in the chat about wanting to be in the mud, right? Playing in the mud. Maybe a child's avoiding something like that, and that can tell us something too about what the motivator is. Maybe there's a sensory component of an activity that's a child might be uncomfortable with or fearful of. And so that can give us information too. So these are just a few ways that in our vocel programs, we're thinking about sensory play. And from here, I want to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker, our guest expert for today. So we have Elise Zavala here with us, and we're so excited to have her here because we really love being able to bring folks who are experts in their field and have been doing this work to our vocel community to share more about their craft. And so Elise has been a practicing occupational therapist since October 2014, so almost 7 years. And she's worked in several different settings, so including schools with children ages 3 up to 21. And Elise really enjoys working with children and their families, and she's currently using her experience to raise her own 2-year-old, and also, this is so amazing, I think, preparing to welcome her second baby in just a few weeks. So I feel so lucky, Elise, that we have you here with us at a time where you're preparing to grow your own family, and really grateful to have you here to offer practical resources and ideas that we can use as parents, as educators, to incorporate into our own routines. So thank you for being here, Elise, and I'm gonna pass it over to you.
Let me just pull up my slides here.
Great. And as Elise is pulling up those slides, just a reminder to everyone that as you're listening, please submit any questions. You can put them in the Q&A box or in the chat. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that introduction, Jessie. So I am here to talk about sensory play with all of you. I'm very excited to share information about this topic. Sensory play is a term that has gained a lot of popularity in the past few years. We do tend to think of finger painting and Play-Doh and messy sort of play activities when we think of sensory play, but it is so much more than that. So I do want to make sure that everyone leaves here with a broader sense of what sensory play is. My goals for you all today is that you would leave this class being able to identify the senses, that you would be able to understand why sensory play is important for your child's development, and more specifically their brain development, and that you would be comfortable listing ways to develop your child's own sensory diet. I also want to make sure that you have access to some new ideas for sensory play that you can incorporate in your child's daily routines by the end of this class. So let's start with what is sensory. I think we're all pretty familiar with our 5 basic senses. That's sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. This is our way of engaging the world. These senses are how our brain receives information of the environment around us. But we don't typically learn about the other 2 senses that are just as important as the first 5. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the proprioceptive sense and the vestibular sense. So I'm going to have you do a little activity with me real quick. I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to touch the tip of your nose, then touch the top of your head, go back to the tip of your nose. Go ahead and open your eyes. I'm pretty confident you were probably able to coordinate the movement of your hand to your nose without having to see your hand and without having to look in a mirror to see your nose, like where it is on your face. The ability to do those movements with your eyes closed is the proprioceptive sense. So your brain gathers information on where your body parts are and is able to coordinate those movements without you having to use any of your other senses. This is important because it helps us participate in activities that require a lot of coordination. So think about clapping your hands or throwing a ball, jumping a rope, riding a bike. That's all the proprioceptive sense. In order to develop our proprioceptive sense, we have to engage in activities that typically look like heavy work or exercise. So think of anything that would be pushing or pulling, any kind of squeezing or deep pressure. All of those kinds of activities and games activate the proprioceptive sense and then work on developing that skill of coordination in our bodies. The next one is the vestibular sense. This one is similar to the proprioceptive sense in that it also regards our positioning of our body, but it's more of a whole body positioning. So it communicates to your brain whether you're laying down or whether you're standing up, if you're swinging or you're rocking or you're spinning. It lets the brain know what your body is doing as a whole unit. It's important because it helps us maintain balance and it helps us maintain posture. You can't work on coordinated movements of your body if you don't have good balance, or if you can't maintain your posture. So that's how the vestibular and the proprioceptive sense kind of work together. The way we develop the vestibular sense is by participating in the actual activity. So walking, running, jumping, swinging, all of those games or activities that require you to actually try that sort of movement is how we develop that. So I know that was kind of a quick summary of the 7 senses, but I am also including a handout that you'll receive at the end of this class that goes into more depth descriptions for each sensory system and how you can kind of activate them and what kind of impact they have on your body. So you'll have that as a reference after this class as well. So now that we know about our senses, we want to know, why is sensory play important? I like this quote. It says, "Play is not a break from learning. Play is learning." Children practice what they learned while they play. That's how they engage in the world. That's how they engage their senses. If you ever watch a child playing, they are probably incorporating more than one sensory system that we just talked about. If you just kind of watch them carefully, they're practicing things that they've learned around them or that you've taught them as a parent or a teacher or a caregiver. Typically, they are given all these opportunities to practice participating in the different sensory systems while they play. It is our job to be more intentional about what opportunities we give them to make sure that they're getting to practice all the different sensory systems during that play. And if we're intentional with those opportunities for play, then we have more control over helping them foster the development of other brain skills. So for example, cognitive skills. If we incorporate some sort of sensory play activity that allows them to count and sort or match, we're building their cognitive skills. If we incorporate a sensory play that goes back to using words that we've taught our children, we're helping them build their language skills. So if you're teaching your child what the words mean for dry or wet or rough or smooth, giving them the opportunity to play with something that's wet and dry or rough and smooth helps them have a real life experience to connect to the word. So then they're able to start using the words and have real meaning behind it. Fine motor and gross motor skills are being developed through sensory play. Those are all important because they're going to need them as they grow up, and they need to learn how to write. That's a fine motor skill. Getting dressed is a fine motor skill and a gross motor skill. Being able to ride a bike and play on the playground or participate in a gym class or a sport is all motor skill. Sensory play allows our child to develop their creativity. Every child I've seen who engages in some sort of sensory play is given the opportunity to incorporate a form of pretend play. Maybe they're playing with someone else so they can create a game between the two of them, or sometimes they're given materials and they can create something completely new. Someone mentioned painting and finger painting. You have the opportunity to create some new form of art. And another skill that's developed during sensory play that's really important is called sensory regulation. Some of you may be familiar with that term, and some of you may not be, but I'm going to talk about it right now. So sensory regulation. I'm going to go through these questions right here that you can see on the slide, and I want you to reflect on your answers to them. So when you wake up in the morning, what is it that you need to help you wake up and get out of bed? Do you set an alarm clock that's really loud? Do you jump in a cold shower? Do you need to have the smell of your coffee brewing and drinking it in the morning help you wake up? When you get ready for bed at night, do you light a candle? Do you dim your lights? Do you take a warm bath? When you are frustrated, what do you do to help calm your body? Do you go for a walk? Do you clean your kitchen? Do you read a book? When you need help concentrating or focusing in work or school, even right now during this presentation, like what are you doing to help yourself pay attention to what I'm saying? Do you have a pen in your hand that you're clicking, fidgeting with, or do you have something cold to drink? Are you chewing gum? Every answer that you have come up with for yourself to these questions, they all pertain to a sensory system, whether it's taste, touch, smell, it pertains to one or two of those. So what it is that as an adult, you have had ample opportunities to explore your senses and activities that have helped you kind of make your body do what you need it to do when you need it to do that activity. So you already know that drinking coffee helps you wake up in the morning. Or you may be the person who's like, I don't like coffee at all, and that does not help me wake up in the morning. That's your sensory preference. You've had the opportunity to develop that. And then by intentionally incorporating it into your daily routine is essentially what makes up your sensory diet. So being able to say, I'm going to have the coffee brewing in the morning so I can smell it. And is you actively engaging in a sensory diet for yourself so that you can be successful in your environment? Our children do not entirely have this skill because they haven't had enough time to experience their sensory world and to register how their body reacts to it. We as caregivers and parents and teachers are more equipped to kind of see how they respond to certain sensory stimulus or activities. So that puts us in a really unique position of being the ones to kind of help guide our child in developing that. We want to pay attention to what helps our child successfully get ready in the morning for school. When our child is really upset about something, what do we do to help them calm down? What do we notice helps them calm down? And does it change as they get older? What helps your child transition through their daily routines? From waking up in the morning to going to the potty if they're being potty trained, to then transitioning to breakfast. Like, what helps them get through that? What does your child need in order to be ready for their nap time or their bedtime routine? We have the unique position of being those detectives right now as our child is growing up and experiencing these different senses, so that we can help them learn how to regulate their bodies, and then we can help incorporate a sensory diet for them. I know that may seem kind of overwhelming at first, but chances are you've already been doing this unintentionally. So think about when you brought your child home for the first time. Chances are you may have wrapped them up in a nice warm blanket for nap time or bedtime. That's the touch system, right? You may have rocked them back and forth in your arms. That's vestibular, that movement, rocking back and forth. You probably sang them a lullaby or played like a sound machine in the background. That's the sound system. So you're already doing a lot of this. What we want to talk about is being very intentional with what you're doing and what you're incorporating into your child's daily routines. I've also included a handout called Discovering Your Child's Sensory Needs that you will have access to at the end of this class as well. And it goes more in depth in each of the categories of the senses that we talked about earlier today. And it helps you kind of have some ideas of what to look for in regards to starting to pinpoint what activities seem to have what sort of impact on your child, whether it helps them wake up and become alert or helps them calm down and ready for the next activity. So I know I went through a lot of information quickly. So far we've reviewed the sensory systems. We've looked at how sensory play can help develop multiple skill areas. And we've discussed how sensory regulation helps us be successful in our own routines, and how if we're intentional about participating in those activities, then we foster positive reactions to our environment. So the real question now is, how do you intentionally incorporate all of these activities into your child's day? I like to bring up household chores because they are routines that we all already do in our everyday life. So from cooking to cleaning to taking care of our household pet, whether it's a dog or a cat or a bird, we already have a list of things that we have to get done in our homes. So taking some time to allow your child to participate in those activities offers ample opportunity for them to engage in their sensory systems. So I know it can seem a little tedious at times to let your child help you with chores. It can be more work initially, but what I like to encourage people to do is to break up their tasks into shorter, simpler tasks for your child. So if you're washing dishes, ask your child to help you dry them so that it's something that they can be successful at and still kind of work on the skills that we're talking about. I also like to bring up how household chores tend to be calming for our kids. So have you ever heard of the term stress cleaning? Or even if when we're really stressed or upset about something or frustrated as adults, we tend to like clean the kitchen or, scrub something off the walls. And that's all heavy work. So household chores tend to be hard work. They require a lot of effort in our muscles and our joints. That's considered a proprioceptive activity. And proprioceptive activities typically always have a calming effect on our bodies. So if you have your child helping with chores, you're also kind of helping them calm and organize their sensory system in general. So here are some pictures of children participating in different household activities. There's a little boy pushing a heavy basket of laundry. Again, that's proprioceptive, heavy work. He's pushing it across the floor. He's got to maintain his balance, so that's also vestibular. You've got the two children who are washing dishes. They're given the chance to explore the different sensations of wet and dry, so that's the touch system. They may see bubbles floating in the air. That's their sight. They're standing up while they're doing it, so they're turning and putting plates on a dry rack. They're working on that vestibular balance. The little girl cleaning or dusting the top of her kitchen. Again, she's working on her balance. The little girl helping in the kitchen. Any kind of cooking or baking activity is going to be working with that smell and taste. Sensory systems, the little boy who's cleaning the window. Again, if it's a really dirty window and he's putting a lot of elbow grease into it, that's a proprioceptive activity. It's a balance activity because he's standing there and he's got to wipe it back and forth. So definitely if you feel that incorporating sensory play might be a little too overwhelming to start with, focus on some household chores. This is a handout of some chores for toddlers. They all seem really simple, but they all address at least one of the sensory systems. So if you look at in the third row, it says outside chores, and it says gather leaves. So if you think about gathering leaves, very straightforward activity, but if you had your child come out and help you with some lawn work, you can incorporate multiple sensory systems. So if they're gathering leaves and putting them in a bag or a box or a wagon, that's heavy work, especially if they're pulling and pushing it around the lawn. The bending down and scooping things up and turning and dumping it in, that's working on balance and posture, that's vestibular. If the leaves are all different kinds of colors, that is a sight system. If some of them are dry or still fresh, then you're working on that touch. Some are crunchy, and making them crushed and hearing how they sound when they crush the leaves, you're engaging the sound system. So really a lot of these activities can incorporate multiple sensory systems. I've included this handout also, so you will have access to it at the end of this class. I'm going to transition quickly to some sensory play activities for infants specifically. I know typically we're not really sure sometimes how we engage an infant or a young baby in sensory play. So I just wanted to give a couple of ideas if you have a really young one at home of what you can try. Tummy time is a great opportunity to incorporate any sort of sensory play activity that you want to think of. Tummy time all by itself is already a sensory activity. For babies, that's the time they get to work on their core strength, their neck strength, so that they can start to participate in other movements. But if they have no core strength or neck strength, and that's what they're working on, as they put their hands in front of them and they're pushing up, that's heavy work. So that all by itself is already a proprioceptive activity. By putting things in front of them, you're just helping include other sensory systems. So putting a mirror in front of the child so they can be visually stimulated by their reflection. Pictures or books in front of them is a great visual stimulation. I like to encourage people working with young ones to always have those gallon-sized Ziploc bags and some tape, and you're ready to go. Whatever you can find to stick in those bags are usually good tools and tend to keep the child's attention for a little while. It's a great way for the baby to kind of experience new textures or visually see some stimulation, and it's all safe because it's all within the Ziploc bag. I like to put a couple of blobs of paint on pieces of paper and stick it in a Ziploc bag and allow the child to kind of paint mess-free, and it's safe. And they really like that visual stimulation as they're painting. Once your child is able to sit up, you can also, if you feel comfortable with it, start incorporating edible sensory play. You take some food coloring and you can just have some fun with noodles and tapioca pearls. Think of dry cereal or oats. You throw them in a bin with some containers that they can kind of scoop and pour, and you've created a few sensory play activities for the young ones as well. Next, I'm going to go through some ideas of sensory play activities that you can do at home. The way I am going to approach this is by going through each sensory system and highlighting some activities you can do based on the sensory system. But by no means am I saying that each of these activities only addresses one system. It was just for ease of delivery right now that I feel like it'd be the best way to kind of approach it. But all of these activities, especially if you're feeling really creative, you can start incorporating other senses as well. So when we talk about sight, sight tends to be a calming sensory system as well. So if you ever think of seeing like fish in an aquarium, that can be really engaging and calming to our body. So we kind of try to mimic those same things for our children. If you have a fish tank, then you've already got a sensory activity set up at home. But if you don't, there are a lot of fun things you can do with plastic bottles. One popular activity I like to do with kids is create our own sensory calming bottle. It's a glitter bottle. So essentially it's half glitter glue, some water with some food coloring, and more glitter because you can never have enough glitter in a glitter bottle. You seal the top and then they just kind of move it upside down and they get to see the glitter move around. It's a nice calming tool and activity that you can take out over and over again and use with your child. You can also create rain sticks by taking some sticks from outside, putting them in a bottle, pick a dry ingredient, whether it's birdseed or cereal or beans, throwing it in there. You've got the visual piece and the sound piece now because it makes that little sound of rain. Glow sticks are a lot of fun. I think you can get a pack of like 25 at the Dollar Tree, so you can always have them on hand. You can have your child dance with them, play some music and have them dance with the glow sticks. You can take your child outside on a warm summer evening and they can kind of see how the glow stick looks as they move it around in the yard. I like to throw them in a bathtub for a new type of sensory experience during bath time for my daughter. If you throw in some bubbles, then you've got extra visual stimulation as the light of the glow sticks reflects on the bubbles. Think flashlights. You can play a lot of games with flashlights in your house, a lot of shadow games, even just putting reflections of different toys can be really entertaining to our kiddos. Then there's also the sound system. I would think any kind of container you have at home is a good container to make an instrument. You can fill it up with anything you find at home to kind of make some sounds. If your child is, you feel is developmentally ready, you can also make doubles of any of your sound containers and ask them to match it. Like, oh, what does this sound like? And what does this one sound like? Are they the same or different? Pulling out pots and pans and turning on some music, letting your child kind of explore the different sensations of sound that they can create on their own. And I also like to encourage people to take their kids outside. There's so many different sensory systems you can engage just by going for a walk outside or laying down on a blanket in your yard. Asking your child to try to identify different sounds that they hear, or even going on a sound scavenger hunt, like let's see if we can hear a bird. Or if you're, in a more urban area, asking, well, can we find a siren playing in the background, and just kind of engaging your child to activate that sense. Going back to touch, we talked about finger painting. Have you ever had your child try to paint with their feet? It is the same system, it's touch, but it's a completely different sensation when it's your feet. It just has a whole new texture, and it's a lot of fun and engaging for your kiddos. If you get a lot of packages at home, don't throw away the bubble wrap. Let your child play with that and feel what that feels like. One of my favorite activities to do with my daughter is taking a bunch of her little plastic animal toys and putting them in the freezer in ice cube trays and freezing them in ice. It will take up a lot of her time trying to free the animals. She creates this whole game. So then there's that whole creativity piece and pretend play where she's trying to free the animals, and I'll give her little tools so she can try to break the ice, pipettes with warm water so she can melt the ice. She's feeling cold sensation and warm sensation. The ice is hard and then it becomes wet. So there's a lot of different language skill development also going on. Stress balls is something that we see sold in stores. We just squeeze them and it helps us feel better. We can also make those with our child, with your students. If you're in school, I've done this one many times. You take a balloon, get a funnel. You can use hair gel, salt, flour, anything you can think of, and then have, once you securely tighten it, have the child squeeze it, have them describe what it feels like in their hand and how it makes their body feel. Have them help you make it so that they're incorporating other skills as well. Smell and taste typically go together, and they're the most popular in the kitchen. If you're at home and you're trying to come up with a sensory play activity, let your child help you with some form of cooking dinner. Even if it's as simple as letting them smell the spices that you're putting into a pot or in a pan that you're gonna cook. Ask them to describe what it smells like. Have them taste test food for you and let you know what they think it tastes like, how they feel when they taste something sour or something sweet. Everyone has different reactions to taste, so it's a great way to ask your child and get to know what their preferences are. Popcorn is always a fun activity because it incorporates all the different senses. I know we've done that one in the school a lot as well. So you pop the popcorn, you get to see that transition from a kernel to the popped popcorn. You get to hear it, you get to smell it, you get to taste it and touch it and see how it feels. So it just incorporates all the senses, and it's a really fun activity. If you have essential oils at home, you can also be creative with that. Put a drop of essential oil in your child's Play-Doh, and now playing with Play-Doh has become an activity that also encompasses that smell system. Now, when we talk about proprioceptive play, a lot of that looks like, again, exercise, heavy work. A lot of pushing and pulling and squeezing. Think of yoga poses, anything that helps your child bear weight like through their arms and their legs. So like think of that frog jump or that bear walk. All of that is really proprioceptive activity. Building a fort with couch cushions and sofa cushions is great. This picture up here on the right corner is my daughter's little tyke toy or car. And she has a basket and she likes to pack so many dolls and stuffed animals in it and hang bags on it and little strollers. And she'll get in there and then go, okay, Mama, push me. That's great, but if she pushes herself, now she's engaging in her own proprioceptive activity. So I really encourage her to do that on her own. So taking advantage of the play that your child is already doing and asking them to participate in one of the senses that way is a great way for you to expand on that. Proprioceptive activities also tend to be very calming and organizing for our body. So it's great to do whenever you feel like your child just needs some help kind of calming down, especially before they're asked to do something like bedtime or a nap time routine. Vestibular activities, all about balance again. So games like Twister are great. Creating obstacle courses on uneven surfaces. In the corner picture here on the left, it's just a towel rolled up long ways. You ask your child to walk along it like a balance beam. It still works on balance, and if they get off the beam, they're not going to fall and hurt themselves. Allowing your child to do something as simple as hanging upside down on the sofa is really heavy input for vestibular activity. That one sends a lot of information to the brain when you're upside down. It's just not a movement we're typically in. So it's really activating that vestibular system. If you have painter's tape or duct tape, you can create your own little obstacle course as well. I know that was a lot of information in a short amount of time in regards to sensory play ideas. I've included a handout that you will also get after this class with 4 websites that offer a lot of information about sensory and ideas for sensory play. They're all created or hosted by OTs or other educators. And real quickly, I want to just go over a couple of things to consider as you start this sensory play journey with your child. Always encourage your child to participate in the sensory activity that you're presenting them, but never force them to participate in it if they're flat out refusing. Make sure you're paying attention to the sensory activities that appear to cause stress or fear or pain to your child. Pay attention if there's any specific activity that seems to result in your child tantruming every single time that it's presented. Be mindful if there's any patterns of avoidance behaviors, or like your child is refusing to participate in the same type of activity over and over and over again. These are all really good concerns to bring up with your pediatrician at your child's next appointment. And I know Justine mentioned if your child is a part of the visual classrooms that they're really aware of your child's sensory preferences. So I would also even bring it up to the staff that work with your child and share those concerns as well and see if they're seeing them in that setting too. Final note, more than anything else, I would like you to leave here just feeling confident. Be confident in your understanding of all the sensory systems we just talked about, and going over the resources that you'll have. Make sure that you observe your child engaging in them while they play. Tomorrow, watch your child playing for like 10 minutes and just see what type of sensory systems they're engaging in already all by themselves. You may already see they have some preferences, and then you can see which ones they haven't really engaged in yet, and that'll give you something to kind of work towards. Be confident in incorporating those activities into your child's routines. The more you practice, the more opportunities you'll start to see with different activities in the day. And then every effort you make is a positive contribution to your child's overall development. So thank you so much for being here and being a part of this and being willing to learn more about sensory play so that you can offer your child more opportunities. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Elise. I would definitely recommend anyone that has a question, please submit it for us. We have about 10 minutes or so left. Elise, I am amazed at how much amazing information you packed in to that quick amount of time. That is no small feat. And I know I saw some of the comments coming in. I thought there was so much I learned from listening to you about simple everyday things that we might already be doing, or maybe even doing ourselves as adults, that we can incorporate our children into and really benefit them, right? As opposed, sometimes we think about those chores as things we maybe want to like protect our kids from, as opposed to realizing the benefit to them. So I love that. I know Clarabelle, who was here, commented on the hanging upside down. And I had that same thought that, I never necessarily looked at that from a sensory aspect before. And it stuck out to me that there's maybe some things that our kids might do that we would sort of just say like, oh, like cut that out or stop that or whatever without realizing. So I'm wondering if you can talk about that. Are there things that kids sometimes do that we might not realize they're doing for a sensory reason?
Yeah, I see that a lot with vestibular. activities, so that whole vestibular system of knowing where your body is in space. So I did mention hanging upside down because it is something you do see and you're kind of like, what are you doing? But it's such a strong, it has such a strong impact on their body when they engage it. The next one that I would say that I see more often when we're talking about a child who's like seeking that vestibular input would be spinning. So if you ever see children just kind of like walking around and then all of a sudden they're spinning and spinning and spinning and you're like, okay, you're gonna fall. They're seeking that input, like they need to feel like that plane of change from being upright to down or all around. So I would say that if you notice those kinds of movements, that's probably your child kind of needing it or wanting it to continue furthering developing that skill of their balance.
Great. And another question that came up was when to be, this question actually that just came in from Tara actually relates to this. So Tara says, at what age do they usually stop seeking vestibular input, like spinning in particular? And the question I was going to ask is, when should we know as a parent or an educator when to be concerned about something versus when something it might be more typical or just something they might grow out of?
Yeah, I think as a parent, you're always going to have, your child best. I would say that more so than being concerned about like how often or frequent it happens would be more of the resulting behaviors after the episode. So if your child is spinning or hanging upside down, but they're completely regulated after that and are able to, follow directions or participate in whatever activity they were about to do, I wouldn't be too concerned about that. I feel like that's just your child kind of doing what they need to do to get their body ready for whatever task it is. I would say if you see the opposite, so for example, sometimes for anyone who owns a trampoline, if you let your child jump on a trampoline over and over and over, that kind of input can be almost over alerting. So it could be like, oh, I want to let my child kind of burn some energy, go jump on the trampoline. It should always be for like 5 minutes or for 15 or 20 jumps. If you feel like your child is participating in an activity like that and then is super silly or can't really concentrate or listen to you if you're talking to them, that's a sign that they're not able to regulate themselves. I'll see that in even older children, and that's something that we have to work on. And it's usually just a sign that it's an area that they may need help in. And just depending on how intense the behaviors are afterwards or how difficult it is for them to sort of come back and focus on whatever they need to focus on, like how long it takes for them could just be a sign that you might need some additional help. So again, talking to a pediatrician would probably be a good time for that. I do want to say that when you have your child participate in any kind of vestibular activity like that, it would always be good to kind of end with the proprioceptive activity. So when you have them moving around a lot, end with something heavy because it calms the body. It like lets your body know, okay, yeah, you're moving around and you're all over the place and you're working on your balance, but here's where your body is now. Now you're standing. Now your arms are at your side and your legs are at your side. And that deep pressure and that input that a proprioceptive activity provides will then help your child kind of calm down and help your child organize. Sometimes kids can also get dizzy or nauseous when they do too much vestibular activities. So the proprioceptive helps. So like even as adults, sometimes if we're dizzy or nauseous, even just like kind of holding your head, you're like, I'm right here, it's okay, we're not moving. You're giving yourself that input, or you're hugging yourself. You're also giving that input to kind of like remind your body that you're not moving anymore and it's okay. Did that answer the question?
It's great, yeah, and I think that as you talked, it's helping me realize that they might, like, our kids might not necessarily actually grow out of some of these things. It's more that like we figure out ways as kids and adults to get our needs met, like in appropriate ways, right? And so it might be, maybe at a young age they're spinning, maybe they don't continue spinning, but they find other ways to get that vestibular need met. Does that seem right?
That's exactly right. You said it very nicely.
Yeah, it's interesting as I was thinking about the beginning of this class when some folks were mentioning things. I think it was Oren was mentioning that her grown son used to twirl hair and still does that sometimes now. Like we still have sensory preferences as adults, maybe that we just don't even notice as much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Then the last question that had come in, and we have a couple more minutes. So if anyone has a last question to get in as well, put it in the chat or the Q&A. But the other one was, you touched on this a little bit, how we find out our child's sensory preferences. If we're sort of have a little one, like an infant or a young toddler, what are some good ways that you would recommend to find out what they might be more interested in?
Honestly, I think it's just giving them the opportunity to try it. So I think the more we know and are confident in our understanding of the sensory systems, then the better able we are to say, hey, let's try these 3 activities and see which one you like. And if your child can't verbalize to you what they like, just being very mindful of their behavioral reactions to it. So then knowing like, okay, this helps my child calm down, or you notice that it wakes them up. So just kind of being mindful of that. Again, just kind of being confident in what you understand about the systems already and giving them those opportunities. So even like the stress balls I talked about earlier, when you make those with your children or with your students, if you're a teacher, your kids can have different answers to the same thing. So you can have like 2 children like squeezing a stress ball made out of salt, and one of them will say like, oh, I like this so much, this feels so good, and the other one's just like, this is silly, and is like ready to throw it. So like that already tells you that one over the other has a completely different reaction to the same thing. So just kind of being mindful of those changes and just giving them, the more options you give them, then the more chances you have to kind of see of like what tools work.
Great. Thank you so much, Elise. I know we've had really great turnout for this class and great participation throughout, which I think sends that message that what you are sharing is resonating with people. So thank you. Thank you for being here. And we send you our very best over the next month as you welcome your new little one.
Thank you so much.
And before we close out for tonight, I just want to preview very quickly that we do have 2 more master classes coming up. So in June and July, in June, we'll be talking about early math, another topic that sometimes mystifies parents and caregivers of how to incorporate math for the real little ones. And then in July, we'll be talking about nutrition and picky eaters, healthy eating. And so 2 topics that are, I think, really important and on the minds of many parents, caregivers, and educators. So please do watch out for the emails from vosel, which will have links to sign up for those, and then spread the word. We really want to get this information to as many people as possible, and know that these resources can help anyone who is working with or raising young children. So definitely spread the word. If you're not already following us on Facebook or Instagram, you can follow along. We're at vosel Kids, and we'll also post about our master classes there so that you can spread the word. Thank you again to Elise, and thank you all for joining, and have a really great rest of your night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.